was the main question or questions that came up about this preparation? Could we start here at this table?
They're not yet ready yet.
Oh, they're not ready. Okay.
They're not ready yet.
We'll give you a few more minutes. 2 more minutes.
This one is ready.
You're ready?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll begin with this group here. Okay. Your statement is why I'm so excited and enjoy working in Taiwan. It indicates you have really given a lot of thought. You're asking and making good points, very good points. You're absolutely right. Mediation, as it's conventionally done, problem solving, is good stuff, but that's not restorative dialogue. There's a time and a place for mediation when it's more technical and problem solving, we got to fix this, work something out. Restorative dialogue, again, it's what I call a humanistic approach, and we'll talk more about this after lunch too. And it really is exactly what you're talking about, or like even what you did in school. It's really, you're more relaxed. The facilitator, notice the words. I keep saying facilitator and mediator. Many programs in the United States, precisely because mediation has become so legalistic and technical, they don't use the term mediation. They'll say victim-offender conferencing, which you saw there. Some will say victim-offender meetings. In Europe, they still use the term victim-offender mediation, and that's fine for you to do that here. But it's a different kind of mediation. That's why I say a humanistic form of mediation, dialogue-driven. Now, your point about co-mediators, what we would say two mediators, co-mediators, many programs in the United States use 2 mediators. Some use only 1. To me, best practices are you have the option of either 1 or 2, depending on the circumstances. If you have co-mediators, it is extremely important that the energy of the 2 co-mediators blends well, that your personalities and styles don't conflict. When I did research up in Canada years ago, and I was observing a mediation, and the mediators never met each other except 10 minutes before the mediation, and they didn't do any in-person preparation. And during the mediation, there was a point where the 2 mediators were modeling low-level conflict. They had different approaches. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't working toward building a safe, comfortable place. So the blending of the energy of the co-mediators, very important, that you know the co-mediator, that you work well together. An example in training, I know, I'll get back to this, but here's an example in training. There are many people who I highly respect who are really good restorative justice trainers. I can't train with them. They couldn't train with me. Our energies don't blend. We have different styles. That's neither good or bad. It just is. And there are certain people who I could co-train with anywhere because our energies blend well. Because we're both very flexible. We can flow with the energy. We can adjust and adapt easily. It's not like we're following 10 minutes here, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. So the blending of energy, actually, that's a concept that really comes from more Japanese and Aikido, the martial art Aikido, which is the blending of energies physically, but metaphorically, Aikido, and I write about this in some of my recent books, is an excellent metaphor. The blending of energies and how when aggressive language comes your way, you don't fight back. You just let it come and go by you, and then you come back with a different kind of energy. So using two mediators, you raised a real important question. I would not recommend having two mediators, one with the victim, prepare them, one with the offender, prepare them, and then bring them together. I mean, some programs in America do that, very few, because that has kind of the energy of you're an advocate for the offender, you're an advocate for the victim. Even if you don't use the term advocate, it's kind of the energy of that's kind of like that, you know? And that doesn't build trust with both parties during the preparation process. The way co-mediation is typically done in the United States would be both mediators would help with the preparation process. The individual meeting with the offender, you'd have both mediators. The individual preparation meeting with the victim, you'd have both mediators. Then when you come together for the facilitation, there's different models for doing that. When I do both individual facilitations, mediations, and co-mediated. What I find helpful, and many people do it this way, one of the two co-mediators will take the lead. They'll open it up. They'll take the lead, kind of set the tone. The second mediator is more in the background, but will help at different points, but they don't say a whole lot. Another way of doing it, which can be very helpful in cases that are more complex. One of the two mediators would open it up and handle the part of the storytelling, inviting people to really talk about the impact. And the other mediator, who feels more comfortable with problem solving and agreements, would handle the part that focuses on how to repair the harm. Another example could be with a domestic violence case. One mediator might open it up with inviting people to talk about the human impact of it. And that mediator might be a mediator that has a background in working with the domestic violence program or has worked with a lot of DV cases. The other mediator would handle a different part. So you can divide up the agenda of who covers what, who takes the lead on what part. There's many different ways of doing co-mediation. But to me, I can't believe how much I'm using the word energy. It's all because of you folks and what I've learned in Asia. But I really, it's changed the way I think and write and train. The blending of the energies of the co-mediators is, from my perspective, not from many other trainers, from my perspective, is as important as technically how you divide up the energy. The more relaxed people feel, when people are angry, they're anxious, like what's going to happen, and all this conflict, the more you as facilitators, the more we model being more relaxed, we're not anxious, we're patient, the more likely that kind of energy goes out in a way that people don't flare up as much. Very well stated. I continue to be impressed by the work in Taiwan, how this program has been set up, interacting with all of you, getting your perspectives and your wisdom on this. You're absolutely right that in presenting what restorative justice is, what victim offender mediation is, we have to use very simple language, easy to understand, not talking about all the stuff you've read or things I've said or whatever. Make it real simple and understanding. You're absolutely right to convey whatever we're saying so that it's understood by the victim and offender. This is to help you. This is about you. This is not the legal system. You know, this is not like a little day in court. This is to give you an opportunity. And from my perspective, in many ways, Asian culture is more open to doing a humanistic approach. Can be, because of the core values within and traditions within Asian culture than even Western culture. Now, when I was in Japan a number of years ago, it was very interesting. I mean, not many, but quite a few Japanese lawyers had come to Minnesota for training, and they invited me over there, and they actually translated one of my books in Japanese. But when I was in Japan, they said, well, Japanese culture is different. You know, we don't want to talk about crime, and they didn't think it would work, the face-to-face. But then when we were there and worked with them and trained them, they kidded about their earlier perspectives and say, yes, it can work. So excellent observations. 谢谢。I can't respond to all of those points or questions. It's hard for me to remember. It was so many good ones, but very good ones. It is not up to the lawyer or the facilitator to decide who should be present to support people. You respect what people want. And if people don't want any support, people respect that too. Now, that's less likely in other cultures. Like in Western culture, a lot of people just want to do it individually. And there are some programs in America that require you must have a support person. I'm not that way. I'm open. Part of empowering people, making it safe for them, is giving them choice. Respect that. There's so many issues you brought up. There's a little focus in restorative dialogue, the way I've trained people and the way I do it, on communicating legal information about the case. You know, they've already talked to the prosecutor or probation officers or whoever is involved. So there isn't, the way I train people, there is not like 10 minutes or 15 minutes of the facilitator saying legally, here's what the case is involved and here's what's the circumstances are. There's not a lot of that. That would have more the energy of a legal interview, which is not restorative dialogue. I'm trying to think of some of the other points you made. And I'm having a hard time remembering them. You made... Oh, time. Oh, yeah. That's what I'm... Yes, timing. Timing and the number of meetings, both. Typically, as I've mentioned several times and in the film, the normal amount of time tends to be about an hour with each person and only one meeting. But that's based on property offenses and minor assaults with juveniles, which is the vast majority of cases in America. Even with minor assaults and fights, like barroom fights or school fights, typically it's one meeting. On the other hand, during that pre-conference meeting, if you're picking up the energy of anger from the victim, or you're picking up the energy from the offender of not fully owning up to it, or not being fully responsible for it, then slow the process. Add an additional meeting. Come back to talk with them. Okay? And it's rare that pre-conference meetings would be 90 minutes. But let me make something very clear. In the very severe, violent, like murder cases, the cases I work on with parents of murdered children, children of murdered parents, where the victim initiates it many years later, you could do pre-conference sessions over 6 to 12 months or 18 months. And you're not doing them in response to what it says in the training manual or what I'm saying. You're doing it because you're working with the energy of what you're picking up, and you're following to the needs of the victim offender. So you might meet with them once a month, and plus call them on the phone. And some of those meetings, particularly of the victim who, like a family survivor of a homicide victim, those sessions could be 90 minutes or longer, because there is so much pain, so much trauma. In general, the more time and space you give to people, including in domestic violence cases, to meet with you in pre-conference, to just let them tell their story. And in most cases, they'll tell the story over and over and over again. That's okay. The more that kind of toxic energy can be released, the better. That de-escalates the conflict. It brings it down. It doesn't remove anger or eliminate, no. It just brings it down so that by the time you bring them together, it's more conducive to an actual dialogue. Excellent questions. I forgot them all. No. Let me start with the number of mediators. This is a very practical comment I'm going to make. One of the downsides of co-mediators, it makes it much more complex to arrange meetings with the victim or the offender based on their jobs or family lives, coordinating the schedules of two different mediators. That can get very, very complex and hard. That's why that's why I would encourage you to be flexible. Use two mediators when you can, but only one if you can't. Because it's just, I don't know about your lives, but my life is pretty busy. And it's hard to schedule. It's hard enough to schedule a meeting, just me and the victim. But if I've got to coordinate it with me and you as co-mediators, then with the victim, and then with you, that can get very complex. 2, the location. Remember how I said always give victims and offenders whatever choices you can. One of those big choices is where would you ask the victim, where would you feel the safest meeting? And then check that out with the offender. And of course, all of what I'm saying you have to check out with your prosecutor because you're working, with them. The question of, are there some cases where you have multiple mediators? Yeah. If you've got, absolutely, if you've got a situation where there were 20 victims or 50 victims, if you had 50 victims, you'd probably want to break it up into a couple different sessions. Like have 10 here and 10 here and 10 whatever. But I know of some sessions where you have to be very adaptable to this, where a colleague of mine who went to Japan with me and trained, and who I trained her many years ago, she worked on a school case that entered the juvenile justice system where it was a fire had been started and could have really destroyed the whole school. And she had a mediation in a large conference room full of all kinds of students, teachers, and then up on the stage, she had small, like tables like this set up with some representatives of the victims, and the offenders were sitting there. And she had, I don't know, probably 20 mediators in the audience collecting questions. So, I mean, there's all kinds of different ways of doing it. But I would not ever do a single mediator facilitation if there's 10 or 20 or 50, victims or offenders. You need to, work with and adjust in that sense. Okay. Spoke of expectations and victims sometimes having far too big of expectations. Here's an example of where I messed up. I modeled forgetting something. That's okay. It'll come back because I was more focused on trying to be relaxed with you. I didn't tell you enough about expectations. One of the absolute primary purposes of the pre-conference sessions is to talk about expectations. Keep expectations low. You saw me do part of this. I said, after you meet the offender, you make it clear you may or may not meet with the victim. They might decide they don't want to meet with you, but I've got to talk with them. And if you meet with the victim and they do want to meet with the offender, make sure you keep expectations low. Make it clear that you have no way of assuring them that all of what you need can be had. Make it clear that many offenders simply don't have the economic capacity to fully compensate for what you want. Or if the victim really wants the offender to go into therapy, to get treatment for their bad behavior or domestic violence against the family, on the one hand, that's good that you're concerned about them to get help, but you cannot, as a facilitator, you cannot promise them or assure them that they'll do that because they have to agree to that. So always working on keeping expectations lower is extremely important. Like one of the first things I'll talk about during the pre-conference session with family members of homicide that I've worked with who initiated the process many years later is about expectations. If they have initiated the process years later, it's very clear they've done a lot of inner work already. And frankly, most of them want the meeting now, tomorrow. They've wanted it for years. And we'll talk about how I can understand you wanting the meeting soon, but I have to make it very clear. I will be glad to work with you, and I will go meet with the inmate, the prisoner. But I have to be clear, there is no guarantee he will be willing to meet with you. I hope he will for your sake, but I'm not going to force him. The warden is not going to force him. Just as I'm trying to create a safe place with you and listen to your needs, I have to do the exact same thing with the prisoner. I am not an advocate for either one of you. I'm an advocate of a process so that both of you can talk with each other and have your needs met. So expectation is extremely important. Trying to think of some of the other questions. Let me tell you, with jet lag, this is hard, keeping in mind 5 questions that come up and I'm not writing. Oh,
building the capability of a mediator.
Yes, okay, that's very important. And this is a concern I have about Taiwan, as good as you're all doing. To have limited experience and to be doing a range of very simple minor cases all the way up to domestic violence and homicide, that makes me a little nervous. Because in the United States, typically just for property crimes and minor assaults, you'd go through 3 to 4 days of training and role-playing. And then if you were going to take more serious cases like rape or homicide or domestic violence, you'd go in 4 to 5 additional days of advanced training. And a lot of that advanced training, most of it, is not about technique. It's about how to work with us, how to work with our energy, how we can be more sensitive, more mindful of what's going on, and creating that safe place. And there's certain little techniques, but it's not a lot. But so how do you develop the capacity among facilitators? Through more advanced training. And I'm not speaking for all trainers. I'm just sharing my experience over the last 4 years. If you had asked me that question, Harry, when I was in my 20s or 30s, I would have told you, well, you need to have this curriculum and you need this training, and here's the book to read, and here's the techniques, here's the PowerPoint. I would have. And that's the way a lot of trainers, probably most trainers, would tell you that even today in restorative justice, internationally. Based on my own experience over the years as a scholar as well as a practitioner, my experience has not emboldened me to believe I know the exact way to do it. You must do it this way. It's quite the contrary, especially because of my work in other cultures. My experience has humbled me to realize, yes, I know some stuff and I've had experience, but there are so many different ways of doing this. So many other cultures, so many other people have so much strength in their own ways. And when I say it's humbled me, I mean it has made me aware that, quote, advanced training for any facilitators, from my perspective at this point in my life's journey, has more to do with being mindful of our own energy, mindful of our own egos, how we can prepare the way, how, using the metaphor of acupuncture, how we can place the needles in points that open up energetic blocks so that the life force, the strength, the resilience, the wisdom of the people we're working with, how that can be activated and flow to maintain some better balance within their lives. All of what I said, for most people, Western people, would not make sense. It wouldn't for me when I was 20 or 30. I'm just being honest with you, and it's what I've learned and what I've learned as much from your culture and many others. I hope that's helpful, responding. And let me tell you, a humanistic approach, which we'll go into again more after lunch, looks deceptively simple because it's very non-directive. Mediators are not talking a lot. They're oftentimes just silent. It looks deceptively simple. It is far more difficult than technique-driven mediation and settlement-driven mediation, where you have a clear, here's what you must do. Here, you must solve this problem, you must do this. It is far more difficult dealing with our own egos, our own energy, to allow the strength of the people we're with to emerge. I don't want to make this sound too simple. I don't want to over-romanticize it like, oh, this will always work. It won't always work. Nothing always works. But I am here to tell you that even people in severe conflicts in Israel and Palestine, in South Africa, in major conflict zones, in situations that politicians would say you could never, ever bring them together. and they could have any dialogue. I've witnessed examples where if you do it right, with enough pre-conference preparation, respect, closing the mouth as a facilitator, not always speaking, yes, they can come together and find some degree of greater peace. It does not solve the problem. They do not end up seeing eye to eye, like we totally now agree on this is what's happened. No. It's about creating a place where people, and this whether it's international stuff on a small scale or back to victim offender mediation, it's where people can hear the story of the other. They can hear the suffering of the other, the concerns of the other. You don't have to agree on everything, but it humanizes the process. This has been well known in warfare historically, in different cultures. It is just harder to hurt or kill someone who you realize is a human being. It's harder. It's even harder for routine criminals. For example, research has shown once you meet the person who you hurt or robbed, even if you're a recidivist, you commit another crime, which fewer do, but even if you do, I don't know of cases where they go back to the same victim and re-victimize them. It's just hard to do that when the victim becomes a human being. It's hard to hate. It's hard to kill.